Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Asad Lalji. Amchi Mumbai, Maximum City, Bombay Mary Jaan, the gateway to India, India's gateway to the world. However you choose to refer to our city, we all agree that it's a city like no other. A unique melting pot of diverse cultures, religions, sights, sounds, fragrances, and tastes. At Avid, we're fascinated with the wealth of experience, happenings, and encounters that the city offers, and its many avatars, histories, perspectives it encompasses. Began in 2012, our series Multipolis Mumbai, we'd like to think is a tryst with the city. This series has explored the city's rich past, as well as looked forward to new horizons. Whilst tracing the journey, her colonial Bombay has become Amchi Mumbai of today. We have facilitated over 42 curated programs across various formats like workshops, panel discussions, city walks, a retrospective at the Kalaghar Arts Festival in 2013, a series at the CSMVS in 2016. For our second iteration that began 2 years ago, we further explored the perspectives of the city ranging from businesses, brands, philanthropy, art, theater, design, technology, urban subcultures, and the list goes on. Continuing on this dialogue with the city, today we seek to examine our legacy and the future trajectory of sports and sporting culture. The National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai, the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, and Avid Learning present Multipolis Mumbai, Sports and the City, a panel discussion that will examine the city's love affair with sports and its position as a preferred destination for showcasing and spectating some of the finest and most watched sports in India. This program is a continuation of Avid's collaboration with the NGMA, and I'd like to thank Mrs. Anita Rupavatram and her team for giving us this opportunity again. It gives me great pleasure to welcome on stage our panel of experts. As I call your name, I encourage you to come find your name and sit. Sorry. Track athlete, sports trainer, influencer Aisha Bilamoria. Co-founder Kathivara Arts and Sports CAS and founder of Sports Quest, Digvijay Kathivara. Co-founder and joint managing director, Procam International Private Limited, Vivek Singh. Sports feature writer, editor, Arun Janardhan. Chief Operating Officer, Kelomo, Ujjwal Diole. And our moderator for the evening, radio producer and host, Rishikesh Kanan, or as he's better known as Rishikesh. For more about each of our esteemed panelists, please refer to the bio handouts that have been distributed. Remember to take these out, put them on silent. You may not get service here anyway, but start using them. Start posting, reposting. Our handle is @Avid Learning, and hashtag is Learning Never Stops. Over to you, Rishi, and look forward to a sporting discussion.
It's one of those places where we can say Bombay and not be worried about the consequences, simply because we're going to start with talking about the legacy of sport in what used to be Bombay, which is now Mumbai. So I'm going to dive straight into it. And the first bit is basically going to be talking about the legacy of great sports people in this city. In some cases, spectating, where you've seen some great sports people in this city. And also the culture of tournaments. And we're talking pan sports, not necessarily just cricket. And the reason we're beginning with this is because, it evokes nostalgia. And a lot of you, especially, the students out there, might not know the rich legacy that Mumbai has in a diverse sphere of influences as far as sporting disciplines is concerned. One of my earliest memories, and my parents are here, and we used to get a subscription to the Sports Star back in the day. And there used to be this wonderful cutout section, the middle section, which you pulled out as a poster and put up. And there was the Gavaskars and, sometimes even older, Vijay Hazare, Vijay Merchant, all those people. But to me, the fact that there were alternative sports people, legends, whose pictures are also there, and they eventually adorn my walls. I'm talking people like Pacey Schroff, the jockey and the equestrian hero. And I remember going to the Mahalakshmi racecourse and turning around and wanting to shake his hand and say, even though I never saw you race, and he's training his daughter now, you are a ledge for me. And then, of course, in terms of hockey, who can forget M.M. Somaya and Mervyn Fernandez? If you look at squash, Adrian Ezra and Meherwan Daruwala, and of course the great Adil Sumariwala, who was an Olympian, 100-meter champion. So I want to ask the panel right on at the top, your sporting heroes from Mumbai and your memories of some landmark sporting events. Like, for example, it's such a pity that the Rovers Cup, which actually started in 1891, this is a football tournament, doesn't exist anymore. It just stopped, and there's been talk of reviving it. The Durand was revived, but that doesn't exist anymore. So, and then we know the rich Maidan culture that we've had and the kind of tournaments that we've had, whether it's the Kanga League or the Pentangular back in the day. So, let's go with you first. And Arun, your Mumbai sporting heroes from the past, or your memories of just having watched sport in the past?
So in this particular case, I'm going to sort of include Pune as an extension because we're looking at history. One of the early great badminton champions, Nandu Natekar, he lives in Pune now, but he's actually a product of Bombay because he is a product of Bombay's education system, and he was one of the early badminton players who really did well at the international stage. There were a few others like Gautam Thakkar who did well at the Asian level. There was Rajiv Bagga who was a champion for the differently abled. Till Nikhil Kanitkar, I think, who was the India number 2 in the early 2000s. So we had a very rich legacy of badminton which seemed to have sort of gone off key at the present stage because all the actions moved down south to Bangalore and Hyderabad, which is where all the champions are. And one of the events I really used to like growing up was the Aga Khan hockey tournament, which used to happen quite often in Bombay. And for some strange reason, the last edition, I think, was held sometime in the late 90s, and for some strange edition, the Aga Khan ended up in fights. The last one at the Bombay Gym ended up in a fight. That one was held after so many years because the edition before that had also ended up in a fight. So that sort of was the end of the Aga Khan, but it was one of the last hockey event that was held on grass, which kind of is an outdated field anyway now, so it's sort of died a natural death, I suppose. But those are my early memories of sport related to Bombay and neighborhood.
How wonderful. I remember, playing sub-junior national tennis, and you wouldn't tell from my current size. But Gaurav Natekar, who was the great Nandu Natekar's son, was, of course, he was in an age group which was senior to us. I remember first meeting him and saying, you're cool, but your dad was so much cooler. And, Gaurav immediately agreed. Yeah. So, and you've been involved, Vivek, not just as somebody who's an avid sports watcher, but somebody who's organized sports, some iconic events. And the first thing I said to him when I met him was, these are the men behind the erstwhile ATP, the Indian Open, which used to happen at Cooperage. And you've seen all of that. So your favorite icons from Mumbai sport and the events, not just stuff that you've organized, but otherwise.
So good evening, and it's so nice to be here. And I think I should really compliment my friend Asad for bringing us all together. And people don't talk about sport as much as they should. So wonderful, and to see such a lovely audience here. So Mumbai has had a huge and rich, very, very rich sporting culture, I remember, rugby. I used to play rugby, and I was fortunate to be at the All India in '86. But such a passionate following at the Bombay Gymkhana grounds, and we used to have the teams from the police play, and everybody come and play. Great culture, football. You couldn't get a seat for the love of money at the Cooperage football ground, when even local teams would play. I remember people like the Olympian Babu Narayan. He recently passed away, great guy. and so many others who would actually come and their skill was something fabulous. And people in Bombay have already always appreciated that. And they've come out and supported that. So for me, the tennis at the MSLTA, watching the greats, Vijay Amritraj and everybody come and play there, built up stands, great fanfare, rugby at Bombay Gymkhana, the race course. What wonderful memories from the race course. So I think it's a fair point that Rishi has brought out, that Bombay has a huge legacy which sometimes gets forgotten. And Bombay has always encouraged and supported sportsmen and of different colors, of different hues. And some sports today may be a little less followed than others, but even today that passion is there, and you see it many times in the year.
Yeah, and then you look back at teams like Mahindra United and the Mumbai City FC, and you turn around and say so much of that is lost. There was such a vibrant football culture. Of course, with the ISL, we're trying to bring that back. So your turn now, Aisha. And I imagine a whole different generation of sports people that you would have grown up on, which is wonderful, yeah?
Good evening, everyone. I come from an athletics background, and I've been a professional athlete my whole life. So my understanding and knowledge of the rest of the sport is actually very little. And I've never had any shame in saying that, but since the time I was 12 or 13, the only goal I ever had was to get to the Olympics. And I was so focused on that I never looked left or right. It was just that tunnel vision where I wanted to head. And the only person I ever looked up to was Xenia Ayrton, the lesser known Parsi athlete. Of course, Adil sir deserves the due credit for being the only Olympian, Parsi Olympian. But Xenia had a charm of her own. When they say you watch a horse running, that's how we watch Xenia running. And I have beautiful memories, being very, very small when I saw her running. So yeah, she's definitely an icon for our community and for the Indian track and field circuit.
And is there an event that really stands out? Did you go and see some comparative sport and go, wow, this is so cool?
Watching Xenia?
Or anybody else?
I watched Usain Bolt in 2010.
He's not very happy about that.
Yeah, I was lucky to watch Usain Bolt just after he won his first Olympic gold medal in 2010. I used to train in Sydney back then, and we were very lucky to watch him come run an invitational race. And yeah, that's...
Well, I meant in Bombay or in Mumbai.
Okay, in Mumbai, yeah. No, I don't think track and field has been that big in Mumbai. Sadly, when Rachita beat P.T. Usha in 1991 at the Priyadarshini Park, I was too young to be there, but that is what I have heard from lots of people, that was a very iconic race because Usha was always at the top, and then there was a new sprinter who came out to defeat her. But sadly, track and field, which I shall talk in the next few minutes, has not got the credit that it should get, because there are some brilliant athletes out there and they should have gotten recognized.
So, this is it about iconic sports people, is that, they lift the sport following to another level. I mean, what she's talking about is Xenia at a time when all the big athletes came out of Kerala. You're talking people like P.T. Usha, Shiny Abraham, Ashwini Nachappa was, again, from the south. And here was this sprinter, this runner doing so well for us. And even in terms of rugby, the fact that Rahul Bose played it, and Rahul went out there on a limb to say, rugby is a sport that one must follow, and it's beyond the confines of just the Bombay gym. One would always talk about how Calcutta had this rich culture, the CCNFC, and the Armenians played, and the LMOB played, but Mumbai has its own rugby culture. So it's very important for iconic sports people to take their brand of sport, in particular when it's not cricket, to use their personalities to take the sport to the next level. Ujjwal.
On the same kind of a concept, and you mentioned a little bit about Mahindra United, and as a part of Khelo More, I know him really well now, Henry Menezes. He has taken the sport ahead in his own right by being part of the, being a custodian of football in western part of India. So, and I don't go back that that much to remember 60s and 70s, but I grew up with my dad, who's a big sports fan. So and I grew up in Pune, so heard stories about Davis Cup in Deccan Gymkhana, for example, and used to tell stories about the magical hands of Nandan Bal, for example. You know, how everybody used to just watch at his volleys and, you know, to just wow. And heard stories about Vijay Amritaj. Never got a chance to watch him, and I've heard him on the television and stuff like that. So I think those few moments in history. But in my time of watching, the earliest memories I have actually was the India versus England semi-final at Wankhede Stadium in the 1987 World Cup. And that, you know, was a sad loss. The entire country kind of, but I mean, it's cricket and it's probably much more popular, and we probably don't have to talk about cricket as much. But that's my memory of that, of watching something spectacular first time in Mumbai, the 1987 semi-final. So that's that. And then of course, the 2006-2007 Kingfisher Open, where the world number 4 Ankich came in. That was a big boost. Unfortunately, that tournament also died. But you know, that was a big moment where tennis was in the city. ATP 250 at that time coming to the city, and you know, at CCI and stuff like that. So it was amazing. It was amazing.
Diggy.
All right, so I'm going to break this up into two parts, you said, but I'm a cricket guy now, since nobody's spoken about cricket. And most of you guys know the stories about cricket, but since we're reminiscing the past, it's important to know what the heroes like Gavaskar and Solkar and Umrigar and Manjrekar and all the Kars, and then you have Tendulkar. Now you have Rohit Sharma, who's kind of broken that mold. But it's important to know what they did as a community to uplift sportsmen, because before Tendulkar, these guys played for 50 and 100 rupees a day. Maybe even less, actually. And if the test match got culminated in 3 days because they won really well or lost very poorly, that's it. They'd only get paid for those 3 days. They wouldn't get paid for the 4th and 5th. They didn't get the full quota. So what they did for the community was quite remarkable. But what came before that, the infrastructure of how sport was built, it was built around community. It wasn't that, these maidans just came that we play on. Whether it's, why is it Parsi Gymkhana? The Parsis made an effort to have a Gymkhana. They went to Lord Harris and said, appoint us a ground. Then the Hindus said, the Muslim community said that if the Parsis can have it, why can't we have a ground? So Islam Gymkhana came. After that, the Hindus said, the Parsis and Muslims go, yeah, what about us? Yeah? So that's when Hindu Gymkhana, that's the story of how the Gymkhana, what they did for their own communities. Communities uplifted, and cricket was the most obvious thing because the British brought cricket here. Oval Maidan, as we know it as a public ground, was a beach. It's reclaimed land. I mean, look what we've done to it now. It's embarrassing and it's a shame. But this is the story of a lot of the public spaces that were created in South Bombay as we know it. North Mumbai, whole different story. But communities and these heroes, the cricketing heroes, uplifted their community to be able to have these recreational grounds, which did more than cricket, but cricket was at the forefront. Coming to events in my lifetime, one of the major events that actually made me play a sport, Mr. Singh's event, a full glass squash court in the middle of the Cricket Club of India. I mean, you don't get to see Rodney Alves. He's a world #1 squash player right in front of you. Kids go up and meet Jamshed Khan. I mean, those things don't happen today. Policy needs to change to be able to get the lesser known sport. It's not possible for a pro camp to pay that kind of money in ground rent and then entertainment tax and the archaic stuff that we have today. It doesn't allow these lesser known sports to actually thrive. So it's a big issue, and I know we'll come to it. But that's what made me play squash and made me play decent level of squash. But had I not been at that event as I think maybe 6 or 7 year old, correct me if I'm wrong, early 90s? 93. Yeah, so 7 years old at that time. Had I not seen them play that level of, I didn't see, like tennis, for example, had I been at MLCLTA, I might have picked up tennis. So if our youth don't get to engage in seeing the world's best, it's okay to be India #1, #2, but if you're not seeing the world's best in your own city and have access to that, you're not going to produce great sportsmen because they're not going to be inspired to be the world's best. They're inspired to be best in their community. But that's not good enough, right? I mean, sport is about competition. And if it's not about competition, then you're playing it for the joy of it, which is fantastic. Like Aisha said, that I only had a dream. Her dream's to get to the Olympics, not to run for the sake of running. I'm sure she has fun running every day, but there's an end goal, which is winning, I suppose. So, yeah.
So you know what he's talking about for all you for all you millennials in the audience is, you know, tournaments like the Pentangular, you know, where it sounds very communal when you said that the Muslims played against the Hindus and things like that, but they rejoiced in each other's success. You know, there was a healthy level of competition, and the Gymkhanas came about. And of course, you know, very recently, the fact that Madhav Apte passed away, these are all wonderful nuggets of Mumbai's culture. He was a man who played in the Kanga League in his 70s. You know, was showing up for club cricket, which is again a unique league because it's played in the monsoon in very football-like conditions. So, you know, there is all these, you know, Dadar Union, the players, Shivaji Park, which again, you know, if you look at it, people like Uday Deshpande were bolstering the Malkham movement out of Shivaji Park, which is not just the Malkham World Cup, yeah, exactly. Which is so it's wonderful to get a slice of that history, and I'm now going to segue into the next part, and you know, it's wonderful that Diggy brought this up because the next part is really about how the sports industry is evolving, and why I'm going to go straight to Vivek is, you know, he mentioned this wonderful glass back court at the CCI. Now, I have friends who are in sports administration and management today, and one of them is Virendra Skina, you know, former India hockey captain. He went to study sports management, and Viren said to me innumerable number of times, you know, he heads the Olympic Gold Quest, and he says, bro, I'm spending more money trying to get funding and sponsorship for my athletes and raising money for them than spending time on developing their sporting skills. And, you know, it's a daily grind. And, you know, if we didn't do that well in Rio, it impacts what's going to happen in 2020 and beyond. And then there are people like Ritvik Bhattacharya, the, you know, multiple national squash champion, who are still trying to do a PSA tournament at the CCI. And again, you know, he's struggling for funds and things like that. And every year I try and help him with the little bit of radio support. And you've been there. I mean, we're talking the Mahindra International Squash Challenge in '95. It was voted the best squash tournament by the PSA. So funding and infrastructure, in particular, funding which is long term. I mean, you've had this wonderful association with Standard Chartered for so many years, Tata, you know, SR for a few years. So raising that level of funding, has it dried up? Is it still available? Take us through that.
It's a good question, Rishi. So yes, funding is a challenge. I would not be, it is a challenge. You're right, infrastructure is a challenge. But I have seen a different side. And I have seen corporates come out, dig their hands deep into their pockets and support. And support, I would say, you know, if you go very purist with them and say this is going to be a cause-based sponsorship, then yes, they get a little reluctant. But if you're able to, on the base of that cause, create an extravaganza, then I don't see that corporate shying away. And that's what ProCam has done. Diggy mentioned and brought back some lovely memories. We did the world's best squash tournament at CCI, the Cricket Club of India. And I remember while we were pitching that to different sponsors, and finally Mahindra stepped up, the simple thing they said is, there is no squash infrastructure in Bombay to do an event of this level. So we just said, we'll find something. And they were right, there was nothing in India. So we actually went to Wales and found a squash court that could fly. It could be packed into crates, taken to a place on an airplane and set up. And we nicknamed it the Thunderdome, which stuck with that court for a number of years. So the moment we created that extravaganza by putting up this court in the middle of CCI, starting the matches when the sun went down and lighting it up so beautifully, it became something that resonated, and it resonated with Diggy as a young man, as a young boy. So I think, to answer your question, Rishi, it's good if the audience knows this. If you just go on a purist level and say, you know, I'm promoting athletics, it's tough. It's very tough. But look what the marathons have done for athletics. They brought the world's best here, and today our people are running with the world's best. 2 years ago, for the first time ever, the Asian men's marathon champion is an Indian. He ran 2:17 in China, which is fabulous. I was watching the 2016 Rio Olympics, and about 35 kilometers into the race, I don't know whether Aisha remembers, our two Indians, Gopi T and this was actually not Rawat, is the other guy, Kheta, I think Kheta Ram and Gopi T, they were about 19th and 20th in the field. So the commentators on Olympic TV are saying, we've never seen two Indians in the top 20 at 35 kilometers. This must be the marathon effect. And finally, they lost a few places, but they finished credible 25th and 26th in the Olympics. So it's happening, it's changing, but we have to view it from a sponsorship lens of creating an extravaganza, bringing different aspects of society together, and at the same time helping the sport grow. And I think then sponsorship is not a challenge.
You know, but Ujjwal, you wanted to bring in CSR at this point of time, you know, with the CSR bill playing out. How much of CSR money has gone into sport, and what is the potential, what is the focus as far as that is concerned?
So, as everybody probably knows, 2% of the at PAT level companies who are making 500 crore and above revenue have to contribute to CSR, and sports has been added as part of one area in which you can invest money as well. A lot of companies are looking for avenues to utilize that because they feel that there's a lot more emotional attachment that can be generated by spending that money beyond food and hygiene nowadays. And so when we go out in the market and we speak about it, we realize, you know, big giants such as petroleum companies, even somebody like Unilever, you know, they look at sport as a great avenue, and they want to look at providing better public spaces to play, and in return, and they're looking at agencies who can talk to the government, and government is open enough to, you know, say that, you know, with the playground policies and stuff like that. I think there's a lot to be done, even in Bombay, where the spaces are small. But you know things like the proliferation of astro turf and football turfs and stuff like that. If we are able to use these playgrounds, make them more playable, more hygienic, more injury-free, open them up to the public in the morning hours, maybe, you know, create a sustainable environment for coaching of elite athletes at the same time during the afternoon hours and stuff like that. I think CSR definitely, in my mind, is a possible avenue to make to create an overall sporting culture at a grassroots level as well.
Okay, now let's move on to the next one, which is media impact and digital media, television, mainstream as well as alternate media, and how they've bolstered sports spectating in particular. And I think in that aspect, Kabaddi suddenly coming back into the collective consciousness of this nation has a lot to do with television and digital media. I mean, you build a facility like the Dome, you know, at the NSCI, and then you put Kabaddi in there, a sport which, you know, a lot of people said would not do well and this and that. And suddenly it becomes the coolest thing to hit sporting kind, if I could call it that. So, Arun, you'd really be the right person to answer this. Digital media, television channels, print, how they've managed to increase viewership and build audiences for sporting events in the city of Mumbai, with Kabaddi being one example, and if you could cite some other examples, the proliferation of that.
So, you know, over the years, the media has done a few things right and a few things not so right. What they've done right is, one, the amount of attention that young kids playing sport have got. I remember at midday when I used to work there, we used to be very serious about school sports, and a couple of occasions when I've gone for school matches, parents have come up to me and told me that, you know, the day the kids see a reporter or photographer, they play that much better. So it gave them aspiration, right? The second thing is that the sport is now a business, and the more people are aware of the fact that it's business, every time Kohli or Sindhu sign multi-crore deals, you see an opportunity, a career opportunity there, which is great for a kid, and is great for a parent who might be resistant to the idea of the child, you know, choosing sport as a career. And the third thing is that the media has aided sponsors. If Tata or Standard Chartered is happy with the marathon, it's a part of it is because of the amount of coverage they get, and that's ultimately what any sponsor needs and wants. Even though there is some amount of press that does not name sponsors, and I'm sure Vivek would agree, but it still gives sponsors what they want, which is basically bang for their buck, right? As far as Kabaddi is concerned, the problem, the thing that media hasn't done well is not really promoted indigenous sports, the Kabaddis and the Khokos of the world, or the Malakhambs of the world, primarily because one, they don't see it as global sports. Two, they don't see it as glamorous enough, and three, it's an English media problem rather than a regional media problem. So the English media would not see it as sports that are worth covering or promoting too much. With Kabaddi, a few things went right, which is basically the organizer of the Pro Kabaddi is also the broadcaster. So the moment you have that, you eliminating one major problem of having to go to someone and say, show the sport. Star and Mashal did a wonderful job in glamorizing Kabaddi, in the way they build the courts, in the way they build the stadium, the commentators, the clothes, the whole shebang, the surround content that they did with it, etc. Right? So that really helped. And finally, in as far as digital media and television is concerned, the more television covers sport, the better it is. And the fact that all television channels today have a supporting application helps, because ultimately we need multiple devices in this day and age. We don't have the attention span for one device. We get distracted. The Cricket World Cup is a perfect example. It is happening at the same time as the Wimbledon final, and I had two devices on because they're both ending at the same time. It was harrowing, but I was so glad that I had two devices on, one on streaming, one on television. I could watch both of them. And I was, at that particular moment, for somebody who dislikes technology, I was so glad for technology because I could see both of them at the same time. So technology and digital media is really aiding that evolution of not just sport, but the viewer himself or herself. And another example is fantasy sport, for example, because fantasy sport gives you an opportunity to engage with a match or a sport without directly watching it. So right now it applies to the EPLs and the IPLs of the world, but I know what's going on in an EPL match even if I'm not watching it, because I'm playing my sport and I know who's doing well and who's doing badly, right? So, and social media, obviously, because that gives you a third screen on how to follow sport. So all these things are basically helping you follow sport in different ways without necessarily sitting down and watching it.
That's an interesting point that he made, saying, the English media is to blame for not promoting indigenous sport. Like a classic example is, Tom Alter, God bless his soul. His interview of Sachin Tendulkar, is still one of the most viewed videos, because he was a kid in the Maidan, just coming off a game, and Tom got him and interviewed him, And there were enough reporters, and there are enough reporters going to even school level tournaments, and, covering the fact that two Shardashram boys went and did what they did, world record thing. But are they covering the Malkhambs of the world or the Kho challenges of the world is a big question we need to ask. And Diggy, I want you to come in here, because a classic point is there's so many people who follow English Premier League football in this country. And especially in Mumbai, since we're very Bombay-centric for this one, you find Man United clubs and Liverpool clubs and Arsenal clubs. And then football takes so much time to pick up, except, the odd occasion when Sunil Chhetri goes on and makes an appeal and Virat says, okay, fine, join us and let's support the team. And then suddenly Andheri Sports Complex gets a full house for a football game. So, the cool factor has a big role to play, especially with millennials on digital media and those mediums. How do you get around to promoting indigenous sport in Mumbai city today?
You've answered it, right? So I'm going to touch on a bit of both their points. One is obviously the media plays a really important role, and multi-channel media, not just like broadcast media, but there's digital and all this stuff. And Ujjwal, they're doing work with my friends on this AstroTurf, playground policy thing. I think it's very policy-centric. It's great to have the Prime Minister tweeting International Yoga Day and Get Fit India and all. That's just marketing stuff, which is fantastic to bring the awareness to the audiences. But you need to follow that up with a policy. Start with 50 centers around the country. Start with 100 centers around the country. Pick your top 10, 12 cities if you have to. Have a sports policy. Look at the state of the playgrounds in the city. It's not embarrassing. They should be illegal. There's no city in the world who produces international heroes like we do for cricket, who are subject to that kind of. It's horrendous. I mean, I'm on the Maidans like every Saturday and Sunday, and I'm privileged because I can afford the best. And if I beg to pay somebody for the best, I wouldn't be able to get it. The rise of AstroTurfs is an example when you said for football. We're in a country of idol worship. Until a Sunil Chhetri or a Virat Kohli or a Sachin Tendulkar or Amitabh Bachchan doesn't make a plea, it won't happen. Now you have a prime minister who's almost in idol worship mode, He has the power to make these differences, but they have to follow up with policy. A playground policy. Sri Lanka, that small little island nation, has a playground policy. The reason why the Sangakaras and Jayavardhanas of the world emerged is because every village has to have a cricket ground. That was their policy in the 1980s. It was a policy. It was a national policy. However good or bad, but at least they had to have it. And some of the tea estates in Sri Lanka, population of 2,000 or 3,000 people, have phenomenally beautiful, well-maintained cricket grounds. The reason why Sri Lankan cricket, and they won the World Cup in '96, whole different state of affairs now, but they got there. So I think our heroes, Virats and whoever else of the world, must promote indigenous sport, and it needs to be backed up with policy where that indigenous sport has dedicated infrastructure. How much space does it really require? Counter argument people make, Bombay doesn't have the space. The little that you have, I guarantee you that, as Mr. Singh said, you make phone call to 10 corporates. They will provide AstroTurf and infrastructure overnight. And as Ujjwal will tell you, it takes less than 2 months to set it up. There should be no excuse. It's just all at a policy level and political will. That's about it.
So Diggy writes this mail to me saying, man, I know that you want to talk about the glorious legacy of Bombay sport and things like that, but I'm going to come across as this big pessimist because not much is happening in the present. And you got to agree with him, and I said, man, you've got to speak your mind. That's the way it is. And this is where Aisha comes in.
Before you end the Malkham story, I read something interesting that before the Malkham World Cup last year, I think India won the World Cup, but one of the Malkham athletes was asked, I think she was from Slovakia or something like that, she was asked, how did you know about this? So she said, I knew about it because in a dance show, the guys who won the dance show were Indians, and they said that they learned this because from the age group of 8 to 12 or 8 to 16, they were doing Malkham in Shivaji Park.
Wow. How cool is that? So, for those of you who don't know what Aisha is doing on social media, really living under a rock. I have so much respect and love for this girl. I mean, if you look at Fit Girl, which is her movement, it's contributed to not only popularizing track-related events in the city. There's so much awareness about fitness, and through her social media handles, she also plays such an important role in inspiring women. And she talks about fitness, body image, all of that. So really using social media in the right way, Aisha, in spreading awareness about sport, popularizing that, supporting female sporting talent in the city. Let's talk that.
I just want to continue a little bit from what
Sure.
Diggy said and then go into this. It took 31 years for Priyadarshini Park to relay a track. 31 years for a track is almost my whole life. And it takes about 8 months for a track to be set, to be laid, to set, to let it dry and then use it. We had the track ready in 4 months. The track needs to be about 4 to 5 meters deep for it to have a long-lasting effect, but the track is just about 1 meter deep. I can say this openly because I have been through so much corruption as an athlete myself. I've seen corruption, I've been a part of it. I've been rejected, I've been told I won't get a place in the team. From first, I've been put second. The infrastructure is such a huge issue with our country that, like he said, it's not like we can't do it, but if we want to do it, we really will do it. And I struggled through so many issues as an athlete, so as I grew out of being a professional athlete and as I grew into being a coach, I was very sure about telling my students that we will never complain about infrastructure. We will use what is available. And I think I'm so proud to be a Bombayite. Bombay has every facility available. We're lucky to have the Hanging Garden stairs. We're lucky to have the Siri Road Hill. We're lucky to have Priyadarshini Park. However bad Oval may be, we're still so lucky we have a mud ground with grass. So I always feel very privileged that we're athletes from Bombay, because there are so many athletes around India who don't get these facilities. Even though there is, again, so much corruption with registration, entry fees on the track, it makes me sad to see that there are so many lower middle class people who cannot afford to pay the fees of these tracks, and we're quite privileged that we can pay. But even though we have this infrastructure and facility, there are people who cannot still use it, and that is the sad state of our city. Again, coming back to what I do with kids, for me it's all about education, and that's something I never got. I don't think a lot of athletes got education. We were told what to do, and I've had some of the worst training years of my life in Bombay. Not to forget, the man who made me start running was Savio D'Souza. Everyone knows Savio, sir. He said, run from your heart, and that's what I did for 22 years. Sport was about loving it. It was about enjoying it. Today, it's about business. Yes, CSR is putting in their money. There was a time where I was begging every institute to get me sponsorship. We had no sponsorship, be it Olympic Gold Quest or Go Sport or anybody. They refused to sponsor me because I was not a national medalist. And it hurts me to see that even though today there are athletes who struggle to make it to the national, but they are so talented, and that's where people need to put their money in. You want to build talent, you want to enhance their talent, you don't want them to reach the nationals and then be like, oh, you're worthy of a sponsorship. So my aim with building that talent is, I started a social enterprise called Project Fit Girl, where I decided to include fitness education into this system, because till you don't educate a child, like I was never educated, I was just told if I had to lift 100 kilos on a back squat, you're going to do it, no questions asked. That broke me. That almost destroyed my career. When I was national champion, by 18, I was almost fourth in Maharashtra. So for me, education is a very important aspect of training, and I wish that we have more coaches, not just calling themselves coaches and standing on the sideline and coaching, but actually being out there, no matter what your age, because what your student sees is what they will produce. And I was so lucky that when I trained in Sydney for 4 years, I had a coach, even though he was 25 years older to me, he ran with me. He talked me through it. And I do that with my students, because I think it is so important to be in the court, be on field or on the track with your athlete, and giving them the confidence that even if you are 5 steps behind your competitor, how you fight your mind through it. We're not taught these things, and I think education is the most important thing. I keep stressing on it. Educate your students, educate your athletes. We don't have role models to look up to, right? We're not getting... I was quite lucky to watch Kathy Freeman competing at the 2000 Sydney Olympics, and for me, that's who I wanted to be. I then saw Xenia running. That's who I wanted to be. Our kids are not getting those role models to see, where everything is on the internet, everything is on social media. Yes, it is a great platform to motivate people today, especially the younger generation, but there is a physical contact that they need to have with their role models to know what it takes to be out there in the field and to become like them. So I hope that I can continue educating in this second half of my, I would still say athletics career, because I wouldn't stop running for anything. And I wish that we have more and more athletes who come out with an inquisitive mind to say that, teach me what you're telling me to do and don't tell me what to do, because we're done with telling. We need to now teach. If we call ourselves teachers, then that's for a reason.
Wonderful. I remember when Abhinav Bindra won his gold medal, I did this interview with him on the radio, and this is what he said to me. He said, instead of complaining about the lack of facilities, we should just encourage people to play more sport, you know. But then it's a catch-22 situation, because if people want to play more sport, you know, they'll want more facilities. There's a very important point, Ujjwal, and we exchanged this on mail, and I want you to talk about it, is that, you know, when Saina and Sindhu did what they did, and then eventually, you know, Kidambi, this whole wave of badminton players and Pulela Gopichand's academy, you would have thought that, you know, children would take up badminton, but your pet peeve is that there's a lack of badminton facilities in this city.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, we run a platform where we help people find right coach or facility to play on, etc., etc. And when Sindhu won the World Championships, even right now, so every day our phones ringing, people are asking, or leads are coming in asking for facilities or coaches and stuff like that. The number of calls and leads that we got for badminton just kind of tripled. So usually we were getting maybe 15, 20 requests a day. It became 50 requests a day for badminton, and it became embarrassing where Goregaon Sports Club called us and called me and said, please tell your guys not to send more children, because I can give them trials, but what do I do after that? Because there are 16 kids on the court. You know, there's a coach called Mandar Ranade who has 3 centers in Kandivli and Borivali. And he, a year back, he was extremely happy that we were able to, you know, give him children, and his business was growing and stuff like that. But now he says, what do I do? I don't have anything else to give. And, you know, these 2 girls, Sindhu and Saina, they've just taken badminton to another level. And especially in this monsoon, when this was a record monsoon, parents definitely took badminton with Sindhu winning. I think it all culminated in becoming it just put in front of us that badminton infrastructure is a big problem in Bombay. Big problem in Bombay.
We all know that most all sporting countries have a great school system. Yeah, Vivek? As somebody who's, you know, been in sports management for so long, you must have some vibrant ideas on how to get that school system right, that sports management system right, to build the next level of athletes, or just, you know, to adopt sports as a way of life. Your thoughts?
So the interesting fact is that the school system of sport is very vibrant. So for about 15 years, we promoted the largest inter-school cricket program in the country. And it was called the Parley Cup, the Kellogg's Cup, the Coca-Cola Cup, different sponsors, same thing. And finally, in the 15th year, we had 900 schools playing in 60 different centers in India. So school is not a problem, I feel. There are a lot of schools encouraging. Yes, Diggy is right. There is an infrastructure challenge. Some of the playgrounds are not worth calling playgrounds, but they're still playing and they're still encouraging sport. I think the issue comes when they leave school. Then you have an issue. There isn't any guidance. There isn't any emphasis on sport which should continue. In fact, it should escalate. That doesn't happen. So, the other interesting thing we found was that, contrary to popular belief, cricket was not the #1 sport in the school level. Football was way ahead of cricket. I mean, yes, they played cricket, but they'd have 1 cricket team, they'd have 4 football teams. And hockey, football, cricket was actually #3, I would say. I don't know what Ujjwal will know more than me on this, but
probably #2 now.
Yeah, maybe #2 now. It was definitely nowhere near #1, at least when we were promoting about 10 years back. So the sporting culture at the school level is organized, it's vibrant, it's pushed, and then we lose the kids. There's so much dependent on the own kid's parental backing after he comes out, and that's if we could put some attention of the government's consciousness on that kids who excel at the sporting school level should not be left on their own, should be taken into a system, into an academy, so that their formative college years, something happens. Because otherwise we're losing a lot of good talent, falling through, slipping through our fingers at that stage.
You'd agree with that, isn't it? I mean, the strategic age for most people is when they transition from the junior to the senior level. In some sports, it's 18 to 23. In other sports, it's even earlier. And we're not doing enough at that level.
Yeah, it's very easy for kids to we're still in a disciplined environment while we're in school. So you go for tuitions, you go to school, you go for training. As soon as you get into college, you have your McDonald's, you have your after parties, you have your malhar, you have your, all the external things that are, sport takes a lot of discipline. It demands a lot of discipline out of you. And I'm very lucky that my father was with me in that aspect, because I've seen so many of my own friends, they got into college with sports quota, and that makes me, I would say, yes, I got into Xavier's with sports quota, but people misuse that. There have to be some rules and regulations that allow that sports quota entry to still play for your college or university for the next 5 years. Maybe you're not winning, but you are still actively being involved in sport. I think social media has a lot. I always say social media has its pros and cons. The cons of social media, that kids are so drifted into that, it's like a magnet. They lose their passion of sport. They lose their interest in something that is so disciplined. So it is a concern. I see this with my students today. I've had kids who've left because, of course, they want to do IIT or they want to be doctors, which is fair enough. But don't stop playing sport. My request to all parents is, don't let your child stop playing sport, because sports can change your life. Sports brings about a change in your life, and kids are losing it at a very young age. We want them to continue playing sport, maybe not competitively, but it's so important to be fit. And in today's day and age, where our lifestyle is going bad to worse, I think kids should be playing sport at least 5 times a week.
Arun, sport as a catalyst for social change in Bombay. The brilliance of Mary Com's story is, and she says it herself, she says, I'm a tribal girl from the Northeast, and nobody would have known what I was, because I didn't have the economic or the social background to make it, but boxing put me on the world map. I mean, you have enough examples here in mainstream cricket, though, we're not speaking that much about cricket, but, the Prithvi Shaws of the world. You see small pockets of that happening. I mean, I had somebody called from the Oscar Foundation on my show the other day and talking about how, slum kids in Kolaba are being given an opportunity to play football and being coached and things like that. Are we doing enough to bring sport into that arena, into underprivileged communities, and giving them the opportunity to do so in Bombay? Given, again, going back, the example of cricket is that there was a time when the whole Indian cricket team was the Bombay cricket team. And then all of a sudden, it was the boys from the small towns. And people would turn around and say, oh, look here, the Bombay boys don't have the hunger and the will to succeed. It's the small town boys who have that hunger, to want to do that for 20 years at a trot. I mean, with the notable exception of somebody like Aisha who's still doing it. So, sport as an agent for social change.
I recently met the founder, head of a startup. I cannot name him because I don't have his permission. And he used to be a reasonably decent volleyball player. And he never finished college. And he's very successful at what he does. And I asked him, what are the sort of life lessons you had that brought you up to this stage? And he said it was volleyball. He said sport taught me to fail, or rather taught me to learn from failure. And that it's all right if I lose, because in sport you lose much more than you win, up to a certain stage. He said it taught me how to collaborate with people and to trust others. So if you take it as in a generic sense, sport has these wonderful qualities that stand you in good stead for the rest of your life in what you. But I don't know if we communicate that well enough. I think at schooling level, we communicate sport as something that you need to do, basically to get the kid out of the house or to keep him or her active. But people don't see it as a learning beyond just playing cricket or football or whatever it might be. In terms of if you take the example of cricket, I mean, both Sachin and Kambli came from middle and lower middle class families, and they had the opportunity to take that much further ahead. Prithvi Shaw is another example. Sarfraz was another example. Munaf Patel was a great example, though he's not from Bombay. But one of the things that also happened, which you guys talked about, is people dropping off after school, is also people dropping off a little further ahead in their careers, because the kids who come from underprivileged families, for them, sport also provides employment. And quite often, the moment it provided employment, they lost the motivation to play it. Munaf is a great example, since I mentioned him, because the moment he played a few international matches, he had enough money to buy a plot of land, and he was done. He didn't have the desire to play any further. So there are these things that need to be watched or controlled, and I don't know how that is to be done. But since we spoke about earlier what ails sport in Bombay in particular, for me, far more than infrastructure is something that comes before infrastructure, which is administration. I think the administration sucks. And Aisha, I'm sure, would agree, is the kind of people who run sports and sports bodies are the people who harm sport the most, because they can do so. I mean, if Vivek and Anil can bring an international standard marathon and keep it running for 15 years successfully, with 45,000 runners, you think the state-sanctioned sports bodies can't do something similar like that? Of course they can. I mean, even at a policy level, with these, everybody spoke about it. Your annual budget for sport is 450 crores, which is like peanuts. You can't do anything with it. But the moment a sports organization, body, administrator decides to do something, he or she can definitely chase sponsors, eliminate politics from sport, and do encourage those children to believe that the sport is just not something that I do in school, but can do way ahead. I mean, it can be a career option, and it can go further.
That's a very interesting point he's made. He's saying even today, it's not looked as a viable career option, with the notable exception of cricket, because it's not only about the 11 people who play for the Indian cricket team, but you could still play, Ranji or IPL, or even your local league, the T20 leagues in Chennai, Bombay, everywhere, where you could still make a living out of cricket. But there are parents who are still asking their children that question: can you make a living out of Kho-Kho or a Malkham, even Kabaddi? And you're right, that cannot come unless you subsidize things, you have the right facilities, and things like that. Now, Asad Lalji, I'm going to lighten this up a little bit. Asad Lalji had a very interesting point, and he said, since we're talking Bombay and sports in the city, he said, Dahi Handi is a sport. I mean, there are Dahi Handi unions, people are very serious about it, and there are prize money purses, and the best climber and the best team are given lakhs and lakhs of rupees. And I think that's a very, very interesting thought, because there are sports which are completely indigenous to Bombay. I mean, which you perhaps might not find anywhere else on the planet. You want to comment on this, Ujjwal? So, stuff that only happens here.
Yeah, I didn't think about the India as a sport, but definitely. Is there any restriction now on how tall you can have it? Oh, okay. It's crazy. I think, coming back to Malkham again, I was really proud to see that Malkham World Cup happened in Bombay, and it's coming back again next year, is what I heard, at Shivaji Park. And so, I mean, indigenous sport need to grow, and they will grow. Even MSSA, Mumbai School Sports Association, they are running Kho-Kho, Kabaddi, Malkham inter-school tournaments with participation for good 100-150 schools in each of these disciplines. That in itself tells that there is enough, and many of these schools could be BMC schools, but that tells that there is enough population looking for or having skill set in these areas, which should be encouraged overall.
Again, staying with the surround sound around regular sport in Bombay, Diggy, talk about the Kathiawada Arts and Sports and the work you're doing in the sports market with respect to memorabilia, sports memorabilia, the auctions, and also, how merchandise and sportswear has become so big, with the advent of the middle class and, with team jerseys and how it's very important at the same time to be eco-friendly and be ecologically aware. So the auctions, the memorabilia, and the merchandising.
So I'll start with the merchandise first. Yeah, the market for merchandise has grown, but the sad part is for the merchandisers like us, it's not a very profitable business at all. We're far behind the quality or the fan following. They're very, very few. I mean, I would discount Kabaddi right now, but if you had to pick an IPL team like Chennai Super Kings or Kolkata Knight Riders or Mumbai Indians, which actually engage with their audience at the social media level, which is quite brilliant, they would probably only have their merchandising as another channel of reinforcing their brand. It's not a profitable venture at all for the merchandisers, nor is it really for the IPL team or the franchisee. They don't really care about that from a profit perspective. It will get there, I think, and I think our audiences will also start to appreciate quality a little bit more, but it's at a very nascent stage, and it'll take a few decades and maybe another whole generation for them to really have that kind of fan following that a Manchester United or a Liverpool or these great big, it comes with history. It comes with a lot of kind of, it has to evolve on its own, really. And that's not something, IPL is only 11 years old. It's not even been through a generation. So merchandise will take a bit of time to kick in. But I think that it's a big enough market where merchandisers and franchisees will want to tinker with it. But for a lot of the teams, it's a massive loss-making proposition. And why that's a problem is because of the sustainability aspect. They have to produce merchandise in big numbers, and then they're just sitting on retail shelves, getting it there, the carbon footprint, the electricity, the sales rep. It's all a bit tardy, and I think any business that, globally, it doesn't have to be sports merchandise, has to now find ways to be sustainable over a long-term period. I'm not saying do it on day one, it might not be possible, but to reduce your carbon footprint is going to be paramount for any new business or old business or mid-age business to consider. And I think the garment industry has come under a lot of flack in the recent past because of these issues when things go out of fashion and you have a lot of dead inventory. So it's a bit scary because they just sit in dump yards after a while. Nike, H&M, all these big brands have, because they do franchise with, they'll have Usain Bolt and they'll have big brand ambassadors. And a lot of the product doesn't sell because of sizing or whatever issues. And they've all taken a pledge to reduce the amount of inventory they produce and try to produce it faster if they require it, if the sales are picking up. So that's the merchandising part. But from the memorabilia part, it's completely to do with the past. Everything that I've been talking about, to bring back and educate the younger audiences about the rich legacy sport has had on the city and the country. And doing that through memorabilia is just, it's an interesting way to highlight it because you get to see object, you get to be around an object, touch and feel, see what a World Cup 1983 ball looked like as opposed to what it did today. 10 years later, you look at Mary Com's gloves, boxing would have come a long way. There'd probably be more padding. To look at like cricket bats and balls or hockey sticks from back in the day, it's interesting for a young person to be like, okay, we have all this cool and crazy equipment, but a Milka Singh's shoes were nothing like what Aisha would wear today. And, it's fascinating to see that side by side. Or Abhinav Bindra's World Championship gun. To bring those objects to light, to see what international athletes have used in the past and what they use today, and have that comparison, is just a fascinating way and a peek into the history of that sport.
Well, everybody on this panel has turned around and said they've been inspired to, get into their little world of sport, whether it's playing sport or getting into sports management or be concerned with some aspect of sport in their lives because they saw that big event or that neighborhood event. They spectated. And from a man who's organized powerboat racing, squash, of course the biggest running event, not just in the city, but across the country and perhaps even in the world, tennis tournaments, how easy or difficult is it to put up a sporting event in Mumbai city today? Is it still as corrupt as it used to be over the decades? Is there any chance of a single window clearance? Do you still have to pay off people? We're not going live on national television. It's okay. So, I'd like your comment on that. I mean,
so, there's a wonderful transition, and we actually lived it, and blessed to have lived it. Till about 2004, India was primarily a spectator sport nation. People spectated, people came out, people cheered, for sure. Today, that transition that we have seen, and one of the catalysts has been the Mumbai Marathon, and today you'll be happy to know that there were 2 marathon events in 2004, and we will close 2019 with probably 1,600 running events in the country. It's an unbelievable, unbelievable growth. So the transition that has happened from India being a purely spectatorial sport nation to a participative sport nation. And where ProCam sits, and the privileged perch we have had, is that the consciousness on sport has increased manyfold. It's the conversation at dinner tables, which it never was. I agree with Arun that, it's on the front pages of newspapers today. There's not a single day's newspaper that will not have a sporting headline on it. It wasn't the case when we started ProCam. So the entire ecosystem and the consciousness of sport has gone up significantly, and that's going to benefit everybody associated with it. The fact that people want to touch and feel more, to participate more, is something that's here to stay and grow. So I'm very bullish about sport. There are multiple challenges. And I think Arun hit the nail on the head, when he said that it's not so much about infrastructure and money. Yes, that's important. Infrastructure is needed, money is important. But if good people at the top can help good people at the bottom to do good things, you will see magic. And I think it's so great that people like Aisha are staying in Aisha can do 100 different things. She's choosing to stay in sport. Diggy, coming into sport, he has multiple options in his life. I think it's fabulous when you have these kind of people. It wasn't possible 20 years ago. Today you have these kind of people staying in sport, saying, I'm going to give back, I'm going to make my life from sport. And I think that change is here to stay. It's here to drive the sporting ecosystem forward. So having given this background to answer your question, Rishi, it's going to get easier. It's going to get easier to put up sporting events, to be a sports person, sportsman or sportswoman. It's going to get easier. And I believe that we are entering a wonderful phase of growth as far as sport is concerned.
So I'm going to talk the gender issue now. Are the facilities for women athletes as good as the male athletes? I mean, a friend of mine, his daughter was competing in sub-junior athletics, and they were telling me, the parents were telling me about the appalling conditions that exist for female athletes. Not even proper loos and facilities, and I'm sure your dad and yourself are no stranger to that. Has that gotten better over the years?
We've lived it, and we will continue to live in it, sadly.
It hasn't gotten better. Diggy, you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think it's very important what they said about administration. And if there are people in political power right now who care about sport, who care about fitness, who care about yoga, for the first time ever, as Mr. Singh was saying, that there's become a transition, and awareness in media is very key. Political players are very key. Idols like Virat Kohli and actors are very key to say, hey, don't just watch cricket. I've bought a football team. Let's watch football. Let's play football. But what our political leaders can do is create that policy to put good people in that position. I guarantee you, if I ask the audience, who's our union sports minister, they won't be able to tell you. Or if I ask them, who is the last one they remember, and they'll remember him because he was a sports person. So we need more sports people governing the sport, be it cricket, hockey, football, whatever it is. And that can happen at a policy level, saying that, no, this is it. Take Jatin, for example. Give him a 2-year stint. He'll gladly take it. He'll quit 2 years of his life to be like, okay, give me South Mumbai for 2 years. Let me see what I can do with the Maidans.
Just to interrupt, for those of you who don't know, he's talking about Jatin Paraj.
Sorry, yeah. So, and from an infrastructure level also, I think it comes back to policy, where when Aisha was saying we're privileged enough to at least have this, rural India doesn't. But I think it's not okay to say okay anymore. I'm glad PDP is there, and I'm glad it's all there. I play on the Maidans. But we have to start saying no. I mean, these guys who play cricket or football or whatever it is for their colleges, they should start saying no, we want better, and we can get better. They have to start voicing it within their organization, within their communities, because she might stay in sport and she might run. I might stop playing cricket at a certain age. They're starting up now, and they need to start saying no. And it's if he could build a squash court for an event, their companies having I guarantee you, I can call my friend who is in temporary construction. He could build you a awesome 2 badminton courts at the corner of Shivaji Park, which has plenty of space, and it could be a temporary structure. Give it a program on a 15-year lease, and you'll have badminton in Shivaji Park for the first time. It can be done in 4 months if you want to get it done. It doesn't require much money. I guarantee you sponsors will be all over it. Pulela Gopichand might even say, come on, let me build my academy here. It's just a policy level thing. 1 or 2 people have to make that decision.
Okay, unfortunately we've run out of time. We've actually pretty much covered everything on my list except the emerging technology in sport, but that's not so much a Bombay or Mumbai thing. I wanted to get into VAR and DRS, but like I said, it's not a very local thing. So we're going to have to open out questions now from the audience. Asad, you want to ask a question? You're number 1.
Sure.
Okay.
Taking off Diggy to Vivek's optimistic note, and Diggy kind of answered part of my question, but since this topic, Multipolis Mumbai, is about the city and the city of Bombay, and you'll have mentioned yoga, and yoga, by the way, how can sports kind of, how can it be incorporated into our city and our open spaces? There are a few open spaces, but how can it be optimized? Are there any best practices from the West that, okay, Marine Drive is closed one day, or, Vivek Singh closes half of Bombay once a year. And the second question is, many of you all, I was on a flight to London once, and everyone was going to watch the match. Everyone goes places, there's cultural tourism and there's sporting tourism. Do you think Bombay ever will be a sporting tourism place?
Interesting.
I think the marathon brings a lot of people to Bombay, and we're really thankful to ProCam for that. As much as I'm not a big fan of distance running, I'm purebred sprinter, but I've seen the changes being a coach, being an athlete, that the people thrive on this marathon. People are coming to Bombay to see it, maybe from nearby places, but it's a start. And like you're saying, sport is evolving, and I see it because I've been in it for 22 years. I wish I was younger again. It's great to see how sport is evolving, and yes, like he said, policies need to be made. So if we have a yoga day, we shut parts of Bombay and we actually do yoga on the streets where people come out to participate. We want participation. We're not just looking for medalists. So I think, again, comes back to policy making.
Just to one point
Sure.
on that, Wankhede is probably empty 340 days of the year, you can tell me that. And the Melbourne cricket ground in Australia is occupied for 340 days a year. So that's the difference. It's just a policy difference.
Yeah, it's crazy, that he should bring this up, because we were in Australia, and I, being a tennis fan, I wanted to take a tour of the Australian Tennis Centre. And that evening on the Rod Laver Arena was a Fleetwood Mac concert. So I was like, this is great use of a sporting facility in the off time. That gentleman there in the second row. Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted to touch upon this point of where Arun mentioned about losers and winners in sport. Even if you get the money, even if you have all the money this panel wants, you will again invest it in events and infrastructure. You're not investing it in people, because we don't invest in failures in sport. We only invest in successes. Because where's Karmarkar, who actually lost a very close, I was in Rio watching her lose that spot of, the third bronze. In the 1980s, she would have been a hero coming back home. Because just because Sindhu and Sakshi won the bronze and silver, we said Karmarkar is fourth, and she failed. So we don't really invest in people, we invest more in sports. Only we have to start investing in failures that people will say, okay, even if I fail, there is some insurance that I'll get ahead in life. Gavaskars and Vensakars and all that you mentioned, people would have done successful even if they have failed in sports, because they are that kind of people. They were educated probably, they had a family system. A Tendulkar in cricket, cricket is an exception, but other sports, there's no investment in failures. People fail, the downside is more than the upside, for 99% of the people. And the 1% that the panel spoke about, anyway money will follow them, because they have already, gone above that mark where they can become a coach in cricket, and even a first class player becomes a coach and there's enough market for it. But in other sports, there's no market for, a bronze, say a 4th place Neha Karmakar becoming a coach in gymnast, because nobody's investing in her, because she did not get the bronze of which Sakshi. So I think the investment should be on people, on failures, or on people growing up rather than just on sport. And then we'll have people really coming up, because people are really worried about failures in India, because once you're a failure in India, you really don't, you're nowhere.
I'm sorry, this might be off topic, but the word failure should never be used in sport, ever. Nobody fails. You only learn something out of it. And at the Olympics, there are no failures, there are only winners. Because to get to the Olympics, you are a winner to get there. So, yes, sport teaches you to do everything, sports and life, right? What you mentioned, what the volleyball player said, that's what I learned. Gavin always said, I don't care if you come last, as long as you ran with your heart and you felt your best, you're a winner. So sports, we want to change the mindset of people, and I think this is our generation is the one that needs to do it. There are lots of good people out there. We want to change the mindset of people towards many things.
So I don't think that was a question, it's more a comment. You're right. Yeah. There'll be enough opportunities given to the Rishabh Pants of the world, but if a Karmakar fails, that's it. You're not going to see funding. Sorry, that lady there. Sorry, you were saying something.
No, I think Deepa was not really a great example. She's got a lot of limelight. She's been given a lot of support. So I think, yes, you are right, a certain number of years ago, but today people are recognizing that even if you make it to the Olympics, even if you make it to these platforms, you're bringing glory to India. And Deepa is one example of a person who didn't get a medal but still got a lot to take away from it. So it's changing, maybe not as fast as you wanted or we like it, but it is changing.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk, nobody here talked about parasports, and that is a very big area. Just recently in Basel, PV Sindhu got the gold, and at the same event, on the same day, the para players won 10 events, 10 medals, and there was no coverage of that at all. That's one whole area. There is some stuff happening even for para players in Bombay. There is a Dharavi Sports Center where people who are on wheelchairs, there is a swimming pool where they swim. There are people on wheelchairs playing badminton regularly, and there is no awareness of what is happening. And that certainly is a big area that needs support.
Wonderful. Yeah, none of us spoke of that, about para-athletes. He briefly mentioned, he briefly mentioned Rajiv Bagga, but yeah, you're absolutely right, ma'am, and thank you for bringing that up. It's very, very important. You guys can take your name before you ask the question. You can, yeah, we're going to float some mics there. You can take your name saying, I'm so and so. Please announce, yeah.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. Thank you so much for all of your inputs. I am curious about two things. One is the role of sports PR. Arun, if you could tell me. Sports PR, public relations, sports PR. And secondly, what is the current lobbying that exists in terms of sports people and companies like yourselves and individuals like yourselves currently negotiating with the state and the civic administration over here? I'm just curious. Thanks.
One is PR, sports PR. The second is how does one liaise with the government to improve the facilities? I think Vivek can answer that.
So I'll answer the first part of your question. The good and the bad. The good is that the PR industry itself in the roughly 2 decades that I've been in journalism, the PR industry itself has grown like tremendously. To the extent that now pretty much every sporting athlete, leading athlete, has a PR manager, a PR agency, or a company that manages him or her, and therefore it's all sort of very funneled. And therefore, I think the amount of press that leading sports people get these days is much more than it used to be. The negative side of that is that the stories you get are very filtered. So when in my early days, we used to have access to sports people directly. We could sit in the changing room. I have traveled in trains with people, chatting to them, met them on in the market and stuff like that. That doesn't happen now. It's all very controlled. You're sitting in a room and the PR is monitoring every single thing that you say.
My partner's in PR.
Exactly. So the stories you get are less colorful, but the amount of publicity a sports person gets is much more.
And Vivek can take the one about liaising with the administration for better facilities.
So, like we mentioned, there is a lot of work happening. Today, the two major bodies that we have, which are industry associations, FICCI and the CII, have specific committees doing nothing but driving the nation's sporting agenda. And it's fabulous. They put a lot of effort and weight behind it. Ujjwal, I think, mentioned about CSR. Today there's a move to lobby with the government to make sports a mandatory portion of CSR. And also in future to include sponsorship of events at the grassroots, district, state level as part of CSR. Today sponsorship is excluded from CSR. So there is some efforts happening, and FICCI and CII at the front of it. And even at the state government level, sports has, I feel, I don't know what the panelists would feel, but has taken much more of a stronger position than it ever did in the past.
Okay, we haven't had any questions from this side. Udita, yes. Your name, please, and then go ahead with the question.
I'm Ankit, and I know some of these people on the panel. I have one is a suggestion, since we have, you guys have mentioned you mentioned the memorabilia and all of that. Why don't we have a museum for this kind of thing? If that can
actually. I wanted to be the first to open it, but we have a great museum in Kolkata. It's privately run. Wankhede could have a museum, CCI could have a museum, but that means involving bureaucracy and having 28 committee members who know nothing about memorabilia or the past making decisions. Whereas, private players in Kolkata with historians like Boria have set up like museum. I think it's called Fanatic. I haven't been there, but I've seen photos. They've done it very tastefully and professionally. So
you guys start one in Bombay then?
We do.
Some of you on this thing. So that's one
There's
thing.
an idea there. Yeah.
But the other thing that a real question was, a couple of months ago I saw a young girl at the airport, and she was checking in what looked like a cricket kit. And then I looked her up sometime, and I think her name is Jemima Fernandez, I think. I was very inspired by some of the stuff I saw online. And, obviously, cricket has been spoken about, but women's cricket now is really at a fantastic level, and, which again you didn't see in the past. I don't know if any of you have anything to add to that, because obviously it helps, that really progress in some way. That's for anyone.
Actually, that's very interesting. I want to say this. We have a 6+-year-old daughter, and we noticed that in the school that we send her to, the boys play football separately and the girls play football separately, and we kind of brought it up with the PT teacher, saying, why can't the girls and boys play together? And he said, if the girl gets injured, then the parent-teacher association will come and pull us up. So that's why we make them play separately. And I think that's a mindset that has got to come from, even parents need to turn around and say, so what if my child gets hurt? It's going to cause me pain, but it is sport at the end of the day. And I think there's got to be a mindset shift as far as that is concerned.
But to your point, there are dedicated academies which, so for example, in Shivaji Park, there's an academy called Female Cricket Academy. About 80, 90 girls train there regularly. So there are dedicated cricket academies. Even in a school like Bosco, for example, when we work with Bosco, we've seen female cricketers bowl, a 14-year-old girl bowling to a 14-year-old boy, or vice versa. So I've seen the change, and I think the coaches are the same set of exercises, they're part of the warm-up routines, the nutrition stuff like that. I think things are there, and people have, especially in cricket, I think and maybe only in cricket, there is definitely an awareness that women's cricket is here to stay. Yeah, and she's part of the COA as well. So I mean, she's been given. Yes.
And I want to ask you about the corruption in sports. I myself, I'm a karate player, and I have faced a lot of corruption in state level and national level. So what should we do about that? Because we all.
Well, I spoke about that, and Vivek, I think, said that things are changing. But you want to just add to what you've already said?
If you're passionate about something, you will pursue it for the rest of your life. If you allow anything to affect you, it will kill you. I've been through so much corruption. I was not in the India team in 2012 Olympics. I was not in the 2006 Melbourne Junior Commonwealth Games. I should have been there. That didn't stop me from continuing what I'm doing today. So don't let it break you. People will come into your life to break you. Sport is a test, and it will test you. It will challenge you. That's why it's sport.
Thank you, ma'am.
Wonderful. Yeah. Last one. Asad says last one. The boss says last one. So.
Okay. Hi, my name is Udita. So, a couple of things. One is on the museum thing. I just wanted to say, because I write about cinema, there's a wonderful museum of cinema on Pedder Road, which I think 7.5 people have gone to. And it just goes to show, there, exactly, 7.5 people in this room. It's actually really been a labor of love for the curators who put it together. And there's some beautiful pieces and some rubbish. But, I mean, it just goes to show that, if the might isn't behind it, or if the might isn't right, it's not going to really integrate into the city. So, I mean, I think I agree with you about the challenges of doing that. The point I wanted to make was about, the synergy between popular culture and sport, for example. Again, talking about, say, gender and the rise of sort of interest in, say, other sports, like, say, wrestling. I think a movie like Dangal or Americom has gone a long way into sort of taking the message out about equality, about what is possible, about, I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think I think they've worked really well to sort of support each other in doing that, and now we're seeing a spate of biopics that are in the pipeline. So I don't know if any of you have a thought about that.
I think very highly of that. I think there should be more of that stuff happening. Sports, biopics, films, it definitely helps. You guys want to take that? Or there's just unanimous agreement on that. Okay, there's some people who've been gesturing for a while. You can quickly go, please.
We talked about sports infrastructure. How do we increase the number of qualified coaches?
Interesting question, because today qualification doesn't play a role in our country, sadly. That's why I stress on education. Coaches aren't educated enough. They played sport, they became a coach. Right? What you're doing in the 70s and 80s, you're still doing in the 20th century. That's why we're not winning Olympic medals.
Training the trainer. Yeah.
Training the trainer, yes.
Yeah, you want to quickly go?
Hi, my name is Sumit. Quick question to the panel. You've spoken about kids wanting to get into sports, and in schools they're doing a lot. But how do you motivate kids today who have iPads and TVs and mobile phones? How do you get them to not say like half an hour in school I'm doing sports and then I'll go home and just sit? How do you get that passion in them to want to go home and still want to...
This is a whole different panel discussion.
That's parenting
and all the parents here will now get emotional about this.
I think it has a lot to do with your teachers and parents, yes. Parents and teachers, I have students who come for my class because they see the passion in me. That's what excites them to run. And again, like I said, when your coach is hands-on involved, it makes a huge difference to the athlete. At the same time, children love it when you educate them, when you teach them about body parts, you teach them about how you can use this part of your training into your life, your posture, when you go to interview or where you go for an exam, the stress level, how to deal with it. It's all on education. And if coaches are not educating children, children are not going to care, right? Because easy education is YouTube. But hands-on and face-to-face education is so important, and I think we need to build that interest into children today, which is fairly lost, but we're on it.
I'll tell you one take to that. Don't go by what Aisha says, because it's very esoteric and I love it. Switch the Wi-Fi off and kick Junior out of your house. He'll find something to do. I wish they would listen, but they don't. We are losing the battle to these electrons. We are losing it. Let's face it. Switch that Wi-Fi off and kick him out of the house. There is no, or her, same thing. There is no other way. You can talk till you can. Aisha leads by example, but believe me, when she has kids, they are in their own world. Switch that Wi-Fi out and kick them out of the house. There's a lot happening in the city. There's a lot of.
It's a whole different panel discussion.
There's a lot of.
Okay. He says we're going to get kicked out of this facility.
We're going to get kicked out of this facility. So just a few. I know the topic is sports in the city, and having the elevators off to test your stamina wasn't part of the game. But thank you for making the trek up here. Thank you to the students of the National Academy of Sports Management. Thank you for being here. Hopefully we've inspired you to kind of pursue your careers in sports. Thank you to our wonderful panelists. This was a great discussion. Thank you for being here. This is the 42nd edition of Multipolis Mumbai. The next one is on October 16th, and the topic there is dance and the city. There's lots of information on the next Avid programs. Please pick it up or follow us up on social media. Thank you very much and have a good night.